I still see its shadow when the lights go out. The floorboards still groan under an invisible weight, even now, years after it first arrived. I remember the exact chill that swept through the hallway, a cold that had nothing to do with the winter air, right before the shape solidified in the gloom. It wasn't a trick of light, it was an absence, a gaping hole where sanity used to reside. It started subtly, as these things always do, around the time the autumn leaves were just beginning to surrender their vibrant golds for a muted, brittle brown. I remember that period with a kind of detached clarity now, a fragile bubble of normalcy that feels utterly alien to me. I was Eleanor Vance, a freelance illustrator, tucked away in my small Victorian house, finding a quiet, almost monastic rhythm in the solitude of my days. My life then was a comforting cycle of morning coffee, the scratch of charcoal on paper, the soft glow of my digital tablet, and the gentle creak of the old house settling around me. It was a life I cherished, free from the incessant demands of others, a canvas of my own making. My studio, the sunroom on the house's east side, was my sanctuary. It smelled of turpentine and old paper, a comforting scent that anchored me. I would spend hours there, lost in the intricate details of a botanical illustration or the sweeping lines of a character design. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic from the main road, the occasional chirping of sparrows in the overgrown ivy, and the soft rustle of my own movements. This was my quiet world, meticulously crafted, safe. The first whispers came as little more than an auditory illusion, a faint scratching, sometimes, from behind the plastered walls of the living room, indistinguishable from the mice that occasionally found their way in despite my best efforts, or a soft, almost metallic clinking sound from the kitchen, which I attributed to the old pipes groaning under changing water pressure. These were the expected eccentricities of an older home, stories in the making, not omens. I dismissed them with a shrug and a mental note to call the exterminator or a plumber, tasks that always seemed to slip my mind in the face of a looming deadline. Then came the peripheral glimpses, fleeting shadows, darker than they should have been, at the very edge of my vision. A momentary shift in the air, a density that wasn't quite a draft, but felt like something solid moving just beyond my direct gaze. I'd be sketching, deeply focused, and a flicker would catch my eye, a dark smudge against the far wall of the studio, a sudden deepening of the hallway's gloom. Every time I turned my head, it would vanish, leaving only the mundane reality of an empty room, dappled sunlight, or the familiar patterns of the wallpaper. Fatigue, I told myself, rubbing my temples. Too many late nights hunched over my drawing board, my eyes strained from the screen. A trick of the light, nothing more. But the tricks began to repeat themselves, weaving a pattern of unease into the fabric of my routine. The feeling of being watched, at first a fleeting, almost paranoid thought, grew more insistent. It was like a chill breath on the back of my neck when no window was open, a pervasive prickling sensation that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I would pause mid-stroke, my hand hovering above the paper, and slowly scan the room, my gaze lingering on every empty corner, every closed door. There was never anything there, of course, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of a car, the thumping of my own heart. Yet the feeling persisted, a constant, unsettling companion in my solitude. One brisk afternoon, I remember it distinctly, I was trying to finish a particularly detailed commission. My focus was absolute, the pencil moving with practiced ease across the Bristol board. The air in the studio was cool, but not cold. Then a distinct shift. A profound drop in temperature, immediate and localized, directly behind me. It wasn't the kind of cold that seeped in from outside. It was an internal cold, radiating from something unseen. My breath hitched, and I felt an inexplicable pressure, as if a profound drop in temperature, immediate and localized, directly behind me. It wasn't the kind of cold that seeped in from outside. It was an internal cold, radiating from something unseen. My breath hitched, and I felt an inexplicable pressure, as if a great silent weight had settled close by. My hand froze, the pencil tip digging a tiny gouge into the paper. A wave of profound dread washed over me, so potent it felt like a physical blow. Then, a faint, acrid smell, like damp, decaying leaves mixed with something burnt, ghosted through the air, clinging to my nostrils. It was a smell I had never encountered in my house before, alien and utterly repugnant. I spun around, my chair scraping against the floorboards, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing. Just the empty space, the still air, the sunlight falling harmlessly through the window. But the smell lingered, a tangible bruise on the quiet air, a stark declaration that something was truly amiss, something beyond tired eyes or old pipes. That was the day the comfortable familiarity of my home started to crumble, replaced by a gnawing vulnerability. The faint scratches became louder, more deliberate, not behind the walls now, but within them, a creeping presence in the silent house. It wasn't the scuttling of mice, it was a rhythmic scraping, a heavy, dragging sound that seemed to follow me from room to room. My rational mind, that once solid anchor, was fraying at the edges. I stopped dismissing the drafts as quirks of an old house. They were icy fingers that brushed my skin, even when the windows were locked tight, carrying with them that faint, foul scent of decay, just like that afternoon in the studio. The feeling of being watched intensified, from a prickle to an undeniable pressure, a constant, malignant gaze that seeped into my very bones. Sleep became a battle, each creak of the floorboards outside my bedroom door a potential harbinger of something unspeakable. One night, the terror reached its zenith. I was huddled in my bed, desperate for sleep, the house completely dark, save for the sliver of moonlight filtering through the blinds. The silence was suffocating, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing. Then the cold deepened, not just around me, but inside me, a profound invasion. The air thickened, heavy with that familiar, sickening smell of damp earth and something charred. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. In the doorway, where the moonlight ought to have fallen, there was an even deeper shade of black, a profound, consuming void. It was not merely the absence of light. It was a hungry, absorbing darkness, impossibly tall, unnaturally still. My mind screamed, but no sound escaped my throat. It began to move, not walking, not gliding, but simply shifting, flowing like a stain across the threshold, consuming the moonlight as it advanced. I squeezed my eyes shut, a desperate, childish plea for it to vanish, to be a nightmare from which I could wake. But the gold intensified, and the acrid smell choked me. When I forced my eyes open, a whimpering sound finally tore from my throat. It was closer. A towering, indistinct mass, a wavering column of pure shadow, devoid of any discernible features, yet radiating an undeniable, chilling presence. It hovered just feet from my bed, and in that absolute stillness, I felt its intent, a silent, ravenous emptiness. My body seized, paralyzed by a fear so primal it erased thought. I could only stare at the impenetrable blackness that drank all light, utterly overwhelmed by its suffocating proximity. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, it receded, drawing back into the doorway, dissolving once more into the ordinary shadows of the house. The temperature slowly returned to normal, the foul smell faded, and the suffocating pressure eased. I was left alone, gasping for air, trembling uncontrollably, soaked in a gold sweat.
The room was empty, the moonlight once again streaming through the blinds, painting familiar patterns on the floor. But the quiet was no longer peaceful. It was hollow, echoing with a terror that had fractured something fundamental within me. That night marked the true end of any semblance of peace. The physical encounter may have passed, but its indelible mark remains. I still see its shadow when the lights go out, a persistent stain on my vision, a ghost burned into the very fabric of my perception. Every creak, every flicker of light, every unexpected chill sends a jolt of ice through my veins. The house, once my sanctuary, is now a cage of endless vigilance. I walk through its rooms, knowing it's gone, but utterly convinced it never truly left, not from the corners of my mind. The line between reality and hallucination has blurred irrevocably, leaving me adrift in a perpetual twilight of dread. Some shadows, once truly encountered, don't just dissipate when the sun rises. They become an indelible part of the landscape of one's mind, a persistent ache in the quiet corners of reality. They etch themselves into your perception, leaving a profound absence where your sense of safety once resided, forever altering the way you see the familiar. Even now, the memory of that invisible weight pressing down upon my home still makes the air feel thinner, colder. Eleanor Vance's struggle to reclaim her own home, to prove her sanity, is a harrowing journey into the depths of dread. Here on Content Channel, we explore these fractured realities, and I have to ask you, when does trying to rationalize the unexplainable become a dangerous form of self-deception? Thank you for joining me on this reflection into the lingering darkness. Until our next encounter, consider how much we truly know about the ground beneath our feet, especially when the earth itself seems to hold a chilling secret.